Chapter 1. The creature in the rain. The alley smelled of rot and rain-soaked stone. Mira pulled her coat tighter, cursing herself for taking the shortcut. The market district was safer, crowded, lit by shop windows that stayed open past dark. But she'd wanted to avoid people, avoid the whispers that still followed her 6 months after the trial. That's the one who lied. Cost a good man his career. Probably wanted attention. She told the truth. The jury hadn't believed her. Now she lived in a studio apartment above a pawn shop, worked overnight shifts at a 24-hour diner, and took alleys to avoid familiar faces. The sound stopped her, a low, pained yowl that raised every hair on her neck. Mira hesitated, keys clutched between her knuckles like makeshift claws. Smart women didn't investigate strange noises in dark alleys. Smart women went home, locked their doors, and pretended the world's cruelty wasn't their problem. But she'd never been particularly smart about self-preservation. She found the cat wedged between a dumpster and the brick wall, its black fur matted with something darker than rain. Blood, she realized with a sickening jolt. A lot of it. "Hey," she murmured, crouching slowly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The cat's eyes opened, and they were wrong. Too large, too knowing, gleaming with an intelligence that made her stomach clench. Not golden or green like a normal cat's eyes, but silver. Mercury bright and utterly alien. It hissed weakly, trying to drag itself deeper into the shadows. "You're hurt," Mira said, keeping her voice soft. "Let me help." She shrugged off her coat, ignoring the cold October rain that immediately soaked through her shirt. Moving carefully, telegraphing every motion, she wrapped the fabric around the cat and lifted it. It was heavier than it should be, solid and strangely cold even through the layers. The cat went limp in her arms, those eerie silver eyes fixed on her face with an expression that looked disturbingly like assessment. "I have a first aid kit at home," she told it, as if the creature could understand. "And tuna. Do you like tuna?" The apartment was exactly as she'd left it, sparse, clean, depressingly empty. She'd sold most of her belongings after the trial, after her landlord had evicted her and her savings had evaporated on legal fees. What remained fit in 3 boxes and a single suitcase. Mira set the cat on her bed, the only real furniture she owned, and carefully unwrapped her coat. The wounds were deep, claw marks raking across the animal's shoulder and flank. Something had tried to kill it. Something with talons. "This is going to hurt," she warned. She cleaned the wounds with antiseptic, hands steady from years of patching herself up. The cat endured silently, muscles rigid beneath her fingers, those unnerving eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, exhaustion hit like a physical weight. She'd worked a double shift before this, been awake for nearly 20 hours. Her hands trembled as she set out water and the promised tuna. The cat ignored both, continuing its silent vigil. "Suit yourself," Mira muttered, collapsing onto the threadbare couch. "But if you're going to die, please do it quietly. I can't afford to lose my deposit." She meant it as a joke. Dark humor, the kind that kept despair at manageable distance. But when she woke 3 hours later to pre-dawn gray, the cat was sitting on her chest, staring directly into her face, and it was speaking. "You shouldn't have brought me here," it said in a voice like silk dragged over gravel. "Now they'll come for you too," Mira screamed. The cat, no, not a cat, nothing natural had ever spoken with that voice, leaped away with inhuman grace. It landed on the windowsill, silhouetted against the lightening sky, and its form began to shimmer. The air bent. Reality twisted. And suddenly, impossibly, a man stood where the cat had been. He was tall, lean, dressed in black that seemed to absorb the dim light. His hair was dark as pitch, his skin pale as marble, and his eyes, those same mercury silver eyes, tracked her with predatory focus. "Don't scream again," he said, and there was command in his tone. "You'll wake your neighbors, and that would complicate things." Mira's back hit the wall, keys still somehow clutched in her shaking hand. "What are you?" "Wounded." He moved toward her with fluid precision, each step deliberate. "Thanks to you still alive, but that won't matter if they find me here before sunset." "Who's they?" "Hunters, rival house assassins. Take your pick." He studied her face, head tilting in a gesture eerily reminiscent of the cat he'd been. "You truly had no idea what I was when you picked me up?" "You were a cat," A familiar. An extension of my master's power. His expression flickered. Pain, perhaps, or grief. Was, until they killed him. The words settled over her like ice. Master, killed. This was insane. She was hallucinating from exhaustion, or someone had drugged her coffee at the diner, or... "You're in shock," the man said, almost gently. "Understandable. Most humans don't encounter our kind anymore. We've become very good at hiding." He paused. "My name is Silas. I was bound to Lord Draven of House Corvus until 3 nights ago, when House Ravenna assassinated him and tried to destroy his familiars to erase all evidence." "House Ravenna," Mira repeated numbly. "As in vampires?" "As in the second most powerful vampire house in the Northern Territories, yes." Silas glanced toward the window, tension radiating from his frame. "They'll send hunters at sunset to confirm my death. If they find me here, if they find you..." He stopped. "You need to run. Now, before I bring destruction to your doorstep." Something in his tone, the resignation, the self-loathing, cut through her shock. She'd heard that tone before. In her own voice after the trial, after everyone had abandoned her. "Where would you go?" she asked. "Somewhere they can't follow. Somewhere I can die without endangering anyone else." "That's a terrible plan." "It's the only plan that doesn't end with your corpse in this apartment." His silver eyes met hers, and she saw centuries there. Centuries of loss. "I'm trying to save you, Mira Thorne. Don't make me regret it." He knew her name. Of course he did. He'd been in her head probably while she'd slept. She should run, should scream, should call the police, her landlord, anyone. Instead, she said, "The sun's almost up. You said they'd come at sunset. That gives us 12 hours. To do what? To figure out how to keep us both alive." Silas stared at her, something like surprise flickering across his inhuman features. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "I've been called both," Mira said, and felt something sharp and reckless unfold in her chest. "Now sit down before you pass out. Those wounds aren't healing like they should." For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then, slowly, he sank onto her couch. And Mira realized she'd just invited a vampire's familiar, possibly a vampire himself, into her home. The smart choice would have been to run, but she'd stopped making smart choices the day she'd decided to tell the truth. Chapter 2. The Familiar's Truth. Silas looked worse in daylight than he had in shadow. The wounds Mira had bandaged in his feline form were visible now as dark bruises spreading across his collarbone, disappearing beneath the torn fabric of his shirt. His skin had an unhealthy pallor, and when he moved, he flinched, a micro-expression of pain he tried to hide. "You're not healing," Mira said, pulling her meager first aid supplies from under the bathroom sink. "Why not? Familiars draw their power from their master's blood. Without that connection," he gestured vaguely at himself, "I'm severed. Dying slowly. How slowly? 3 days, perhaps 4. The wounds will fester. The transformation magic will collapse. Eventually, I'll simply... stop." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. "It's a kinder death than Ravenna would have given me." Mira's hand stilled on the antiseptic bottle. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." Silas watched her with those unsettling silver eyes. "A familiar without a master is a loose thread in the tapestry. The vampire houses don't tolerate loose threads. Because you know too much? Because we're weapons." He leaned his head back against the couch, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "Familiars are created through blood magic, a binding ritual that ties a human soul to a vampire's power. We become extensions of our master's will. Spies, assassins, messengers. We can shift forms, walk in daylight, enter homes without invitation." His mouth twisted. "All the advantages of vampirism without the weaknesses. Except one. You need them to survive. Yes." The word fell heavy between them. "Lord Draven was kind for a vampire. He never forced me into anything I couldn't bear, but he owned me nonetheless. Body, soul, every breath I took for 300 years. 300 years." Mira tried to wrap her mind around the number and failed. "You don't look old?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Familiars age differently, slowly. We're caught between human and vampire, mortal and immortal. I was 26 when Draven turned me. I'll still look 26 when I die. She should be terrified. Should be calling someone, anyone. Instead, she found herself sitting beside him, close enough to feel the unnatural cold radiating from his skin. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "How did they kill him?" Silas was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then blood poison. Someone close to him, someone he trusted, laced his feeding source with silver nitrate and wolfsbane. By the time we realized it was too late. His hands curled into fists. House Ravenna orchestrated it. They've been consolidating power for decades, eliminating rival houses one by one. Corvus was small but strategically positioned. We controlled the port districts, the trade routes, and now Ravenna controls them. And they're hunting down every familiar, every sworn vampire, everyone who might testify to what they did. His gaze fixed on her. "Which brings us back to you, Mira Thorne. You saved my life. That makes you a witness. That makes you a target." The apartment suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. "They don't know I exist." "They will." Silas gestured to the window. "I've been unconscious for hours in your home. My presence leaves traces, magical residue that vampire hunters can track. They'll follow it here, then we leave. Now. Where? You have a life, a job. This apartment, I have nothing." The words came out sharper than she intended. "I lost my job 6 months ago. Lost my friends, my credibility, everything I'd built. This apartment?" She laughed bitterly. "I'm 2 weeks from eviction anyway." Silas studied her face with renewed intensity. "What happened to you?" "I testified against someone powerful, said what everyone knew but nobody would admit. And when the trial ended, I was the liar, the troublemaker." She met his eyes. "Sound familiar?" Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or kinship. "You told the truth and were punished for it." "Yes." "Then you understand." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "The houses operate the same way. Power protects power. Truth is inconvenient." They sat in the growing morning light, two broken people bound by circumstance and shared wounds. Outside, the city woke, car horns, distant sirens, the mundane sounds of a world that had no idea monsters walked among them. "If I run," Mira said slowly, "where would I go?" "Somewhere they won't think to look. Somewhere off the grid." Silas paused. "There are places. Safe houses maintained by rogues and exiles. Vampires who've broken from the house system. Can you reach them? If I can stay alive long enough." He touched the wounds at his shoulder, wincing. "But I'm running out of time. Without my master's blood, the binding is unraveling. Soon I won't be able to hold human form at all." An idea sparked in Mira's mind. Reckless, impossible, probably suicidal. "What if you found another master?" Silas went very still. "What?" "You said familiars are bound through blood magic. Could another vampire bind you? Give you what you need to survive?" "Theoretically, yes, but the ritual requires consent from both parties, and no vampire would risk taking on Corvus's familiar while Ravenna is hunting survivors." His jaw tightened. "I'm marked, Mira, tainted by association. Any vampire who shelters me becomes Ravenna's enemy. Then we find someone who's already their enemy. There's no one—" He stopped, something flickering across his face. "Wait, there might be one. Who?" "House Thornwood. They're small, weakened, barely holding territory. But their master, Lucian Thornwood, he's old, ancient, from before the house system formalized." Silas's expression grew thoughtful. "He has no love for Ravenna. They've been encroaching on his lands for years, pushing for him to surrender or submit. Would he help us? Help is a strong word, but he might be willing to negotiate." Silas turned to face her fully. "Mira, if we do this, if we approach Thornwood, there's no going back. You'll be pulled into vampire politics, house wars, blood oaths, and ancient grudges. Your human life will be over. My human life is already over." She heard the truth in her own words, felt it settle bone deep. "I've been surviving, not living. Maybe it's time to choose something different. Even if it means walking into darkness, especially then." She stood, decision made. "How do we find this Lucian Thornwood?" Silas rose with her, moving like a man underwater, slow, pained, running on fumes. "His estate is 2 hours north. We'd need to arrive before sunset, negotiate entry, and pray he doesn't simply kill us for the audacity." "Sounds perfect." Mira grabbed her coat, still damp from the rain, smelling of antiseptic and blood. "Let's go meet a vampire." Silas caught her wrist, his grip cold and urgent. Once we cross his threshold, everything changes. You understand that? I understand. She met his mercury silver eyes. I'm already changed. Might as well see it through. For the first time since transforming, Silas smiled. Small, genuine, touched with something like hope. You're either the bravest human I've ever met or the most foolish. Why not both? Mira returned his smile. Now come on. We have a vampire lord to convince. They left the apartment as the sun climbed higher. Two fugitives racing against time and tide. Behind them, the city continued its ordinary day, and in the shadows, hunters began to circle. Chapter 3. The road to Thornwood, the bus smelled of diesel and desperation. Mira pressed her forehead against the grimy window, watching the city give way to industrial sprawl, then farmland, then forest. Beside her, Silas sat rigid, hands clasped tight in his lap, fighting to maintain his human form. She could see the effort it cost him. Every few minutes his fingers would flicker, there and gone, translucent, as if he were fading from reality itself. His breathing had become shallow, labored. The wounds at his shoulder had started seeping through the bandages. How much farther? She asked quietly. 20 minutes. Maybe less. His voice was strained. The estate sits at the forest's edge. Old land. Protected by wards older than the house system. Will they let us through? That depends entirely on Lord Thornwood's mood. Silas's laugh was bitter. He's unpredictable. Some say he's gone mad from isolation. Others claim he's the sanest vampire alive, that he saw what the houses would become and withdrew before the corruption could touch him. Which do you believe? I believe he's survived 400 years by being smarter than everyone else. Silas turned his head, studying her profile. You're frightened. It wasn't a question. Yes, good. Fear keeps you cautious. But Mira... He waited until she met his eyes. Don't show it to him. Vampires can smell fear, taste it in the air. Thornwood, especially. He'll use it against you if he thinks it'll serve his purposes. What does he want? To be left alone. Silas's expression darkened. He lost someone centuries ago, a human woman he loved. The story varies depending who tells it, but the ending's always the same. She died, and he's never recovered. Now he sits in that decaying manor, watching the world move on without him. Something in Mira's chest tightened. He loved her? Obsessively, from what I've heard. Vampires don't love the way humans do. When we feel something, it's absolute. Eternal. There's no moving on, no healing, just endless repetition of the wound. His gaze drifted to the window. It's why most of us avoid attachment. Why the houses discourage romantic bonds with mortals. Love makes us vulnerable. Is that why Lord Draven never... She stopped, unsure how to phrase it. Took a lover? He did once. A human man who aged and died while Draven stayed frozen. Silas's voice went soft. I watched him grieve for 50 years. He never touched another person after that. Not intimately. Not with affection. He fed. He conducted business. He maintained his house. But he never let anyone close again. That sounds like a terrible way to exist. It's survival. For us, love is a death sentence. The bus lurched to a stop. Not a scheduled station. Just a dirt crossroads where the forest pressed close on all sides. Silas stood carefully, moving like every joint hurt. This is our stop, he said. They disembarked into twilight. The driver gave them an odd look but said nothing, pulling away in a cloud of exhaust. Silence rushed in to fill the space, the deep, watchful quiet of old woods. The estate is a mile north, Silas said. Through the trees. Can you make it? I'll have to. But he swayed as he took his first step. Mira caught his arm, steadying him. His skin was ice cold even through his shirt, and she felt the tremor running through him, his body fighting to hold its shape. Lean on me, she said. I'll slow you down. Then we'll be slow together. She adjusted her grip, taking more of his weight. Come on, one foot in front of the other. They walked into the forest as darkness gathered. The path, if it could be called that, was overgrown, marked only by ancient stones half buried in moss. Trees pressed close, their branches intertwining overhead to block out the dying light. Mira felt eyes on them. Watching. Waiting. The wards, Silas murmured. They're testing us, deciding if we're threat or prey. What happens if they decide wrong? We die, quickly if we're lucky. He stumbled, caught himself. Keep walking. Don't look directly at the shadows. Don't respond if you hear voices. As if summoned by his words, a whisper drifted through the trees. Her name, spoken in a voice that sounded like her mother's. Mira. Mira, sweetheart. Where are you? Her mother had been dead for 3 years. Ignore it, Silas said tightly. The wards pull from memory, from fear. They'll show you anything to make you stop. You left me. You let me die alone. Tears burned Mira's eyes, but she kept walking. One foot, then another. Silas's weight against her side, his ragged breathing in her ear. The whispers multiplied. Voices of people she'd lost. People who'd betrayed her. The prosecutor from her trial reading her testimony in mocking tones. The forest became a chorus of her failures. Almost there, Silas breathed. I can feel the manor's heartbeat. The old magic, just a little. He collapsed. Mira went down with him, knees hitting earth, his dead weight dragging her sideways. His eyes had rolled back, showing only white. His skin had taken on a translucent quality, and she could see through him, through his hand, his arm, his chest, to the forest floor beneath. No. 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 She shook him, panic rising. Silas, stay with me. We're almost there. You said so yourself. A light appeared through the trees. Not modern, not electric, candlelight. Old, and steady and golden warm. And then a figure stepped from the shadows. He was tall, taller than Silas, with dark hair silvered at the temples and eyes that caught the candlelight like a wolf's. He wore clothes that belonged to another century. A white shirt open at the collar, dark trousers, boots that had walked through centuries of mud and blood. His gaze swept over Silas's fading form, then landed on Mira with an intensity that stole her breath. You're trespassing, he said, and his voice was cold as a winter grave. Give me one reason I shouldn't let the wards finish what they've started. Mira met his eyes, ancient, calculating, absolutely merciless, and knew she had one chance. One moment to convince a 400-year-old vampire that 2 strangers were worth saving. Because House Ravenna is hunting us, she said, forcing her voice steady, and I think you'd enjoy making them regret it. Something flickered across his face. Curiosity, perhaps, or amusement. You're either very brave, Lord Lucian Thornwood said, or very foolish. So I've been told. Mira tightened her grip on Silas's fading form. Are you going to help us or watch us die? Because I'd really like to know which before I waste any more effort. For a long moment, Thornwood simply stared at her. Then, impossibly, he smiled. Come, he said, turning back toward the light. Before your familiar dissolves entirely, I'd hate to waste an opportunity to irritate Ravenna. He walked away without looking back. Mira hauled Silas upright, his weight nearly impossible now, and followed the vampire lord into the dark. Behind them, the wards fell silent, and ahead, through the trees, a manor rose like a monument to beautiful decay. Chapter 4. The Master of Thornwood. The manor was dying as beautifully as its master. Mira stumbled through corridors lined with peeling wallpaper and portraits whose eyes had been scratched out. Candles burned in tarnished sconces, their light casting long shadows that moved wrong. Too fluid, too aware. The air smelled of dust and old roses and something darker underneath. Blood, perhaps, or simply time. Thornwood led them to a room dominated by an enormous fireplace, where flames crackled despite the warm autumn night. He gestured to a velvet couch that had probably been crimson once, but had faded to the color of dried blood. Put him there, he commanded. Mira lowered Silas onto the cushions. He was barely conscious now, his form flickering like a candle in wind. She could see the outline of the couch through his chest. He's dying, she said, hating the tremor in her voice. Obviously. Thornwood moved to a cabinet, pulling out a crystal decanter filled with something dark and viscous, a familiar severed from his master. I'm surprised he lasted this long. He poured the liquid into a glass, swirling it thoughtfully. 3 days, you said? Since Lord Draven's death? How did you... I pay attention to house politics. Draven was assassinated 4 nights ago. Ravenna claimed it was internal conflict. a feeding accident. But rumors spread quickly in our world. His gaze sharpened, especially when familiars start disappearing. They're killing witnesses. They're eliminating loose ends. Standard procedure after a coup. Thornwood took a sip from his glass, and Mira realized with sick certainty what he was drinking. The question is why you're here. Why a human would risk the wards, the forest, my uncertain hospitality, to save a dying familiar. Because he saved me first. Did he? Thornwood's smile was cold. Or did you simply happen to be convenient? Familiars are survival incarnate, Miss Thorn. Mira Thorn. Something flickered in his expression. Thorn, like the rose. His gaze drifted to the windows, where vines covered the glass, thorned, wild, choking the light. How appropriate. Silas made a sound, half groan, half gasp. His body convulsed, back arching, and for a moment he was fully cat again. Black fur, silver eyes, yowling in agony. Then human, then something in between. He's collapsing, Mira said desperately. Please, if you can help him, I can. Thornwood set down his glass with deliberate care. But it will cost you. Both of you? Anything. Careful, Miss Thorn. That word is dangerous in my world. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of him. Old paper, cold earth, something that made her hindbrain scream predator. A familiar requires a master's blood to survive, to thrive. The binding ritual is intimate, permanent. He would be mine. Body, will, every breath until I release him or death claims us both. Silas? Mira looked down at the fading man. Can you hear me? Is this what you want? His eyes opened, barely. Silver meeting hers with terrible clarity. Not. Your choice, he breathed. Run, while you can. I'm not running. Foolish, human. Yes. She touched his face, so cold now, like touching marble. But I'm your foolish human, so if this vampire can save you, we're doing it. Thornwood laughed, a sound like breaking glass. How refreshingly naive. Tell me, Miss Thorn, what do you think happens after I bind him? After I give him my blood and tie his soul to mine? He lives. He becomes my weapon, my spy. My killer if I demand it. The vampire lord circled them slowly. Lord Draven was kind, I'm told. Gentle, for our kind. I am neither. I've lived 4 centuries by being ruthless, Miss Thorn. By taking what I want and destroying what stands in my way. If I bind this familiar, he'll have no choice but to obey my commands. Is that what you want for him? Mira's hands curled into fists. What do you want? Excuse me? You clearly don't need another familiar. You live alone in this decaying house, shut away from house politics. So why would you help us? What's in it for you? Thornwood went very still. Then slowly he smiled. And this time it reached his eyes, making him look briefly, devastatingly human. You're clever. I like that. He returned to his chair, settling in with the grace of a predator at rest. You're right. I don't need a familiar. But Ravenna has been encroaching on my territory for decades, pushing boundaries, testing my defenses. They believe I'm weak because I'm alone, that my isolation makes me vulnerable. And you want to prove them wrong. I want to remind them why older vampires survive. His eyes glinted in the firelight. A Corvus familiar publicly bound to House Thornwood. That's a statement, a declaration that I'm not prey, that I'm willing to shelter Ravenna's enemies. You'd start a war. I'd prevent one. Power respects power, Miss Thorn. Ravenna won't move against me if they believe I'm consolidating strength. He gestured to Silas. This dying familiar represents opportunity, political leverage, a chance to shift the board in my favor. And what about me? Mira asked. Where do I fit in your strategy? Thornwood's gaze swept over her, assessing, calculating. You're the interesting variable. A human who walks through ancient wards without breaking, who speaks to vampires without cowering, who demands rather than begs. He leaned forward. You're either remarkably brave or you've lost everything and have nothing left to fear. Which is it? Both. Understanding lit his features. You're wounded. Running from something in your human world. That's why you took the risk. That's why you're willing to bargain with monsters. Are you a monster, Lord Thornwood? Absolutely. No hesitation, no shame. But I'm a monster who keeps my word. So here's my offer. I bind the familiar. He lives, he serves me. And you, he paused. You stay here. As his anchor? His what? Familiars need emotional tethers. Connections that keep them from losing themselves entirely in the vampire's will. You're his tether, Miss Thorn. Whether you intended it or not, he's bonded to you. If I take him and send you away, he'll fade regardless. But if you stay, Thornwood spread his hands. You become part of my household. My protection extends to you. In exchange, you help me navigate something I've forgotten. What? Humanity. The word fell heavy between them. I've been alone too long, isolated. I need someone who remembers what it means to be mortal. To care about things beyond survival and power. You'll be that reminder. You'll keep both of us, he gestured to Silas, from becoming complete monsters. It was insane. Impossible. Everything she'd learned about self-preservation screamed at her to refuse. But she looked at Silas, barely holding form, dying because he'd tried to warn her away, and she thought about her empty apartment, her lost life, the endless gray months of just surviving. If I agree, she said slowly, I need conditions. Thornwood's eyebrow rose. You're negotiating? You said power respects power, so respect mine. I'm not property, not a pet. If I stay, I'm a person with agency, with boundaries. Agreed. And Silas gets a choice. When he's stable, when he can think clearly, he decides if he wants this binding. Not you. Not me. Him. That's unusual. That's my term. For a long moment, Thornwood simply stared at her. Then he stood, extending his hand. You have a deal, Miss Thorne. Welcome to House Thornwood. Try not to die. Mira took his hand, cold as death, strong as iron, and felt something shift. A binding of a different sort, an agreement sealed in shadows and desperation. Now, Thornwood said, turning to Silas, let's save your familiar. He bit his own wrist and darkness poured forth. Chapter 5. Blood and Binding. The ritual was nothing like Mira had imagined. Thornwood's blood didn't drip. It flowed with purpose, dark and viscous, pooling in a silver chalice he'd produced from somewhere in the shadowed room. The liquid gleamed like oil in firelight, and the smell hit her immediately. Copper and ozone and something that made her teeth ache. Hold him still, Thornwood commanded. Mira knelt beside the couch, gripping Silas's shoulders. His body was barely solid now, flickering between forms so rapidly she couldn't track the changes. Cat. Man. Something in between. His silver eyes rolled back, showing only white. Thornwood placed one hand on Silas's chest, right over his heart, and began speaking in a language that predated anything Mira recognized. Latin, maybe, or something older. The words seemed to pull at the air itself, making the candle flames bend toward them. Then he pressed the chalice to Silas's lips. Drink, he commanded, and there was power in his voice. Compulsion. Ancient magic that couldn't be denied. Silas's body convulsed. His mouth opened involuntarily, and the blood poured in, down his throat, impossibly fast, too much for any human to swallow. But he wasn't human anymore. Hadn't been for centuries. The change was immediate and violent. Color flooded back into Silas's skin. His form solidified, snapping into focus like a photograph developing. The wounds at his shoulder sealed, flesh knitting together with audible clicks. His back arched, every muscle going rigid, and he screamed, a sound of agony and ecstasy and terrible recognition. Mira held on, feeling his body thrash beneath her hands. It's okay. You're okay. I've got you. He can't hear you, Thornwood said, still chanting. Not yet. He's drowning in my essence, learning the shape of me, the taste of my power. The binding rewrites everything. His loyalty, his instincts, his very soul. That's horrifying. That's survival. Thornwood's eyes glowed in the dim light. Not reflection, but actual luminescence. A familiar without a master is a weapon without a wielder. Dangerous, unpredictable. The binding gives them purpose, structure. Without it, they'd go mad. Silas's screaming cut off abruptly. His eyes opened, still silver, but different now. Deeper. Infinite. When his gaze found Thornwood, something like worship flickered across his face. Then he looked at Mira, and confusion replaced the devotion. What happened? His voice was raw, scraped clean. You nearly died, Mira said. Lord Thornwood bound you, gave you his blood, saved your life. I can feel him. Silas pressed a hand to his chest, wonder and horror warring in his expression. Inside me, his power, his will, it's like... He stopped, struggling for words. Like he's threaded through every part of me. I can sense his emotions, his thoughts if he lets them surface. I could find him anywhere in the world now. I'd know if he was in danger, if he needed me. That's the bond, Thornwood said, settling back in his chair. You're mine now, Silas of former House Corvus. My familiar, my responsibility, my weapon, he paused, and apparently hers as well. His gaze shifted to Mira. What do you mean? She asked. The binding didn't just tie him to me. It tied him to you. Thornwood's expression was unreadable. You're his anchor, his emotional tether. Most familiars bond to their masters alone. But your familiar has split his loyalty. Half to me through blood and magic. Half to you through... He trailed off. Whatever this is between you. Heat crept up Mira's neck. There's nothing between us. I just saved him. And he imprinted on that salvation like a duckling on its mother. Thornwood's smile was sharp. Congratulations, Miss Thorne. You now have a supernatural creature who would die for you. I hope you're prepared for that responsibility. Silas pushed himself upright, moving with fluid grace that hadn't been there before. The wounds were completely gone. His skin had lost its translucent quality, and when he breathed, it looked almost natural, if you ignored the fact that he probably didn't need to breathe at all. My lord, he said, and the title came automatically. I'm grateful for the binding, for the second chance. Don't be grateful yet. You haven't heard my terms. Thornwood steepled his fingers. You'll serve as my familiar. My eyes in places I cannot walk, my hands when discretion is required. You'll protect this house and its interests, and most importantly, you'll help me navigate the coming storm with Ravenna. They'll retaliate when they learn I'm alive. Precisely, which is why we'll make sure they learn in the most public way possible. Thornwood's smile was predatory. There's a gathering in 3 days, a neutral ground meeting where the houses settle territorial disputes. I'll attend. You'll come with me. Let Ravenna see exactly what they failed to destroy. That's suicide. Mira breathed. That's strategy. Thornwood stood, moving to the window where dying roses pressed against the glass. Ravenna thinks I'm weak, isolated, easy prey. Showing up with a Corvus familiar, alive, bound, clearly under my protection, sends a message. It says I'm not afraid, that I'm willing to shelter their enemies and dare them to do something about it. And if they do, Silas asked, then we fight, or negotiate, or manipulate, whatever serves our purposes. The vampire lord turned back to them. The old rules still apply, even in these diminished times. An attack during a neutral meeting breaks the treaty. Ravenna won't risk open war with the other houses. They'll posture, threaten, but they won't strike. You're betting our lives on that assumption, Mira said. I'm betting my reputation on it. Your lives are just collateral. But there was something almost fond in his tone. Besides, you'll be safe. Humans are protected during gatherings. Ancient law. Anyone who harms you would face consequences from every house. How reassuring. Mira rubbed her arms, suddenly cold despite the fire. What do we do until then? You learn. Thornwood gestured to the room around them. This manor is old, protected by wards and oaths that predate the current treaty. You'll stay here, learn vampire etiquette, understand house politics, and you, he focused on Silas, will relearn what it means to be a familiar. Your old master was kind. I am not. We'll need to establish boundaries. Expectations. I understand, my lord. Good. Thornwood moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. The bond between us, it's permanent, but it's not slavery. I won't compel you unless absolutely necessary. I won't force you into anything unconscionable, but I will expect loyalty, obedience, trust. His gaze swept between them, from both of you. He left, footsteps fading into the manor's depths. Mira and Silas sat in the firelight, processing everything that had just happened. Are you okay? Mira asked finally. Silas laughed, short, sharp, a little unhinged. I'm alive. That's more than I expected when I woke up this morning. He looked at her, silver eyes searching. Why did you do it? Why risk everything for a stranger? You weren't a stranger. You were hurt and scared and trying to warn me away even while dying. She struggled to articulate it. That's someone worth saving. I'm not worth anything, Mira. I'm a weapon, a tool. That's all familiars are. That's not all you are. She reached out, hesitated, then took his hand. It was warm now, or warmer at least. Thornwood's blood had restored something vital. You're a person, with choices, with value beyond what you can do for someone else. Silas stared at their joined hands like he'd never seen such a thing before. Lord Draven said something similar once, that I was more than my function. I didn't believe him then either. Maybe you should start. Maybe. He squeezed her hand gently. Thank you. For staying. For... His voice caught. For seeing me. The moment stretched between them, fragile and new. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. Silas tensed, his body language shifting into something predatory. Someone's here, he said. Multiple vampires. Moving fast. The door burst open. 3 figures flooded in, moving with inhuman speed. They wore black, their faces covered, blades gleaming in their hands. Ravenna had found them, and they'd come for blood. Chapter 6. The first strike Silas moved before Mira could scream. He shifted mid-leap, human to cat to something in between, a shadow with claws and fury, slamming into the first attacker with inhuman force. They went down in a tangle of limbs and snarling, blades skittering across the floor. Run, Silas shouted, his voice distorted between forms, but there was nowhere to run. The second attacker blocked the door, moving with liquid grace toward Mira. She grabbed the only weapon within reach, a heavy iron poker from the fireplace, and swung with everything she had. The vampire caught it one-handed, barely flinching. Human, it said, voice muffled behind the mask. You're coming with us. Ravenna wants to know who's stupid enough to shelter Corvus's familiar. Over my dead body, Mira spat. That can be arranged. The vampire yanked the poker from her grip and tossed it aside like it weighed nothing. Cold fingers closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground. But Lady Katerina prefers her informant's breathing. For now. Black spots danced across Mira's vision. She clawed at the hand crushing her windpipe, but it was like fighting marble. Her lungs burned. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Then the vampire exploded. Not metaphorically. Actually exploded. Flesh and bone erupting outward in a spray of gore that smelled like rotting flowers. Mira fell, gasping, covered in viscera that dissolved into black smoke even as she watched. Thornwood stood in the doorway, one hand extended, his eyes blazing with cold fury. You dare, he said, voice dropping to a register that made the walls vibrate. You dare attack guests under my protection? In my house? The remaining 2 attackers froze. Even through their masks, Mira could sense their sudden terror. Lord Thornwood, one stammered. We didn't, Lady Katerina said. I don't care what Katerina said. Thornwood moved into the room with predatory grace. You violated neutral ground. Broken sanctuary. That's a death sentence under the old laws. Every house will demand your heads. We were following orders. Then your lady is a fool. Thornwood gestured, and the second attacker seized up, body going rigid. Tell Katerina that House Thornwood is not prey, that her ambitions end at my borders, and if she sends assassins to my home again... His smile was terrible to witness. I'll send her back pieces of them, slowly, over decades. He clenched his fist, and the vampire's neck twisted with an audible crack. The body dropped, already dissolving into that same black smoke. The third attacker, the one Silas had tackled, scrambled backward, abandoning his weapon. Please, I'm just a soldier. I don't make policy. Don't go! Thornwood's voice cut like a blade. Run back to your mistress. Tell her exactly what you saw here. Tell her that Lord Lucian Thornwood is done pretending to be weak, that I've taken a Corvus familiar under my protection, and I'll shelter anyone else who wants to defy her little empire. The vampire fled, supernatural speed carrying him through the window in a shower of broken glass. Silence rushed in to fill the space. Mira sat on the floor, shaking, covered in dissolving vampire viscera, and trying to process what she'd just witnessed. Thornwood had killed 2 vampires with barely a thought. No weapons, no visible effort. Just raw power and centuries of fury. Are you hurt? His voice was calm now, almost gentle. I don't... She touched her throat, feeling bruises forming. I don't think so. Silas? The familiar materialized from the shadows, fully human again. Blood streaking his face. Alive, my lord, unharmed. Good. Thornwood moved to Mira, crouching to her level. His hand hovered near her throat, not quite touching. "May I?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. His fingers brushed her skin, cold, careful, tracing the bruises blooming purple-black. "Nothing permanent. You'll heal." He stood, offering his hand. "But you need to understand something, Miss Thorne. This is what your life looks like now. Assassins in the night, violence without warning, death as a constant companion. I'm starting to gather that." She let him pull her to her feet, legs unsteady. "How did they find us so fast?" "Magic leaves traces, residue. The binding ritual was powerful. It sent ripples through the supernatural world. Anyone paying attention would have felt it." Thornwood's expression darkened. "I should have anticipated this. Should have warded the manor more carefully." "You can't predict everything," Silas said quietly. "I've survived 4 centuries by predicting everything." The vampire lord moved to the shattered window, staring into the darkness beyond. "But perhaps I've grown complacent, isolated too long, forgotten that war requires constant vigilance. Is that what this is?" Mira wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly freezing. "War? It's the prelude, the opening moves." Thornwood turned back, and in the firelight he looked ancient. Not old, but timeless, carved from marble and regret. "Ravenna just declared hostilities. They sent assassins to my home, knowing it would provoke retaliation, which means they're either desperate or confident enough in their power to risk my anger." "What do we do?" Silas asked. "We accelerate the timeline. The gathering is in 3 days. Too long to wait. We go tomorrow. Tonight, if I can arrange it." Thornwood's mind was clearly racing, calculating probabilities. "We need allies, witnesses, public acknowledgement that you're under my protection before Katerina can spin this as justified retaliation." "Will the other houses care?" Mira asked. "About one familiar. They'll care about precedent. About the erosion of sanctuary laws." Thornwood paced, energy humming through his frame. "If Ravenna can violate my home without consequence, they can violate anyone's. That threatens every house. So we use their fear against them." "Exactly." He paused, studying Mira with renewed interest. "You understand political maneuvering. I understand survival. It's not that different." She met his gaze. "You need to make this attack seem like a bigger threat than it is. Make the other houses choose between supporting you or risking their own safety." "Clever." Thornwood's smile was sharp. "You're more useful than I anticipated, Miss Thorne." Happy to exceed expectations. Despite the tremor in her hands, despite the phantom sensation of fingers crushing her throat, Mira felt something like purpose settling in her chest. "What's the plan?" "Silas and I will reach out to our contacts, call in old favors, spread word of the attack through every channel we have." Thornwood moved toward the door, then paused. "You need rest. There are rooms upstairs. Pick whichever you like. Everything in this manor is protected, warded. Nothing will get through again without me knowing." "What about you?" Silas asked. "I don't sleep. Haven't in a century." Thornwood's expression was unreadable. "I'll be in my study, making calls, preparing for war." He left, coat billowing behind him like wings. Silas turned to Mira, concern etched in every line of his face. "Are you sure you're all right?" "No." The honest answer surprised her. "I'm terrified. I almost died just now. Again. This is insane." "You can still leave." Thornwood would understand, would he? Mira looked at the dissolving remains of the vampires, the shattered window, the blood-spattered walls. "Because it seems like leaving would just make me a target somewhere else. Without protection, without..." She gestured between them. "Without this. Whatever this is." Silas moved closer, careful not to crowd her. "You saved my life twice now. You didn't have to. You could have run when I transformed, could have refused when Thornwood offered his bargain. But you stayed, so did you. You fought for me just now. I'm bonded to you, literally. I couldn't not fight for you." "Is that all it is?" The question came out softer than she intended. "Just the bond?" Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I don't know. The bond is new, confusing. But there was something before that. When you found me bleeding in that alley, when you wrapped me in your coat and spoke to me like I mattered." His silver eyes met hers. "I think I would have stayed even without the magic. Even without the binding. Because you saw me as something more than a weapon." Mira's throat tightened. "You are more than a weapon." "I'm starting to believe you." They stood in the firelight, Two broken people bound by blood and circumstance and something neither could name. Outside, the forest pressed close, and somewhere in the darkness, Ravenna prepared their next move. But for this moment, this fragile, impossible moment, they were safe, and that was enough. Chapter 7. Aftermath and Secrets. Mira couldn't sleep. She'd chosen a room on the second floor, smaller than the others, with windows facing the forest and a bed that smelled of lavender and dust. The door had a lock that probably wouldn't stop a vampire but made her feel marginally safer. Now she lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the manor settle around her. It was alive, this place. The walls breathed. Floorboards creaked with footsteps that weren't there. Somewhere distant, water dripped in a rhythm that almost sounded like Morse code. At 3 a.m, she gave up and ventured downstairs. The manor was different at night. Darker, despite the candles that never seemed to burn down. The portraits watched her pass, their scratched-out eyes somehow more unsettling than intact ones would have been. She wondered who'd done that. Thornwood himself, perhaps, trying to erase memories he couldn't bear. She found the library by accident. A vast room lined floor to ceiling with books that looked older than countries. A fire burned in the hearth, and Silas sat in a leather chair beside it, reading something in Latin. Couldn't sleep either. She asked. He looked up, silver eyes reflecting the flames. Familiars don't need much sleep. The bond sustains us. He set the book aside. But you should be resting. You were attacked tonight. That's why I can't rest. Mira settled into the chair across from him. Every time I close my eyes, I feel hands around my throat. Hear that vampire's voice promising to take me to Katerina. I should have been faster, stronger. You wouldn't have been touched if I'd... Stop. She leaned forward. You saved me. You and Thornwood both. I'm alive because of you. This time. His voice was raw. But Ravenna won't stop. They'll send more assassins. Better ones. And eventually we'll be ready. Mira surprised herself with the certainty in her tone. Thornwood said we're going to the gathering tomorrow. Making this public. That changes things, right? It should. Public sanctuary is sacred. Even Ravenna won't break it openly. Silas hesitated. But sacred and safe aren't the same thing. Politics are just war with better manners. Tell me about the gathering. What should I expect? Formality. Power plays. Centuries-old vampires circling each other like sharks. He shifted in his chair. Each house will bring their master and a small retinue. Familiars, sworn vampires, sometimes human consorts. There will be blood wine, political negotiations, veiled threats disguised as pleasantries. Sounds delightful. It's necessary. Without neutral gatherings, the houses would tear each other apart. Silas's expression darkened. As it is, we're barely maintaining the peace. Resources are dwindling. Ethical feeding sources are scarce. Young vampires are turning rogue because they have no house to guide them. The system is collapsing. Is that why Ravenna is consolidating power? Preparing for the collapse? Probably. Katerina believes strength is the only currency that matters. That the strongest house will control whatever emerges from the chaos. He paused. She's probably right. And Thornwood? Thornwood is different. He doesn't want power. He wants to be left alone. But he's old enough and strong enough that even Ravenna thinks twice before moving against him directly. Silas studied her face. That's why binding me was strategic. It forces Ravenna to acknowledge him as a player, makes him relevant again. He doesn't seem to enjoy relevance. No. Silas's voice softened. He's been hiding in this manner for decades. Maybe longer. Avoiding the world because it reminds him of what he's lost. The woman. The one he loved. You heard about that? You mentioned it. On the bus. Mira wrapped her arms around herself. What happened to her? No one knows for certain. The story varies. Silas gazed into the fire. Some say she aged and died naturally. Others claim another house killed her to weaken Thornwood. A few whisper she left him. Couldn't bear immortality and chose death instead. Which do you believe? I believe whatever happened broke something fundamental in him. That he's been surviving, not living, ever since. Silas's expression grew distant. It's the risk of loving mortals. You watch them bloom and fade in what feels like moments. Their entire lives just a blink of your endless existence. That's depressing. That's reality. He met her eyes. It's why most vampires avoid emotional attachments with humans. The pain isn't worth the temporary joy. But some do it anyway. Some are foolish enough to try. His gaze held hers, and something unspoken passed between them. Tell me about you. About what happened before the alley. You mentioned a trial. Mira looked away, old wounds aching. I worked at a law firm, paralegal. There was a senior partner, respected, beloved, seemingly perfect. And a pattern of harassment that everyone ignored, because acknowledging it meant acknowledging they'd been complicit. You spoke up. I testified, detailed everything I'd witnessed, everything victims had confided in me. The evidence was damning. She laughed bitterly. But he was charming, powerful, connected. The jury believed his version, that I was a disgruntled employee seeking attention. Suddenly, I was unemployable, toxic. Everyone I'd thought would support me just vanished. Truth is dangerous. Truth is lonely. Mira met his eyes. But I'd do it again, because staying silent would have made me complicit too, and I've never been good at living with that kind of compromise. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You're remarkably brave, Mira Thorne. I'm remarkably stubborn. There's a difference, is there?" He leaned forward, candlelight catching the sharp planes of his face. "You testified knowing it would destroy your life. You saved me knowing I was dangerous. You stayed with Thornwood knowing Ravenna would come for you. That's not stubborn. That's choosing integrity over safety every single time. Or it's having nothing left to lose. Maybe. Or maybe you've always been this way, and the world just didn't know what to do with someone who refuses to compromise." His voice dropped lower. "I understand that. Lord Draven chose ethics over power. It made him weak in vampire politics, but it made him worthy of loyalty. Is that why you're mourning him? Because he was worthy? I'm mourning him because he was kind. Because he saw his familiars as people, not tools. Because he tried to build something better than the blood-soaked system we inherited." Silas's hands curled into fists. "And because Ravenna murdered him for that kindness. Prove that trying to be better just makes you a target. Thornwood is trying too. In his own way. Thornwood is surviving. That's different. Is it?" Mira challenged. "He could have turned us away. Could have let you die. Instead he bound you, sheltered us, declared war on Ravenna to protect a familiar he'd never met. That's not just survival. No." Silas's expression shifted, hope warring with skepticism. "I suppose it's not." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Both of them tensed, but it was only Thornwood, carrying a leather-bound journal and looking like he'd forgotten what century it was. "You're both still awake," he observed. "Hard to sleep after assassination attempts." Mira said, "Fair." Thornwood settled into a third chair, journal balanced on his knee. "I've been making arrangements, calling in favors from vampires who owe me. We'll have support at the gathering. Not much, but enough to make Ravenna think twice." "Who's coming?" Silas asked. "House Blackwater is sending representatives. House Ashmont as well. Both have grievances with Ravenna." Thornwood's smile was cold. "Katerina has been aggressive lately, pushing boundaries, testing defenses. She's made enemies. And you're gathering those enemies? I'm reminding them that unified, we're stronger than Ravenna. Divided, we're prey." He opened the journal, and Mira caught glimpses of handwriting. Elegant, old-fashioned, covering page after page. "This is a record of every treaty violation, every boundary crossed, every questionable death in the past decade. If Ravenna wants war, we'll make sure the other houses know exactly what they're dealing with." Documentation. Mira felt something like respect bloom. "You're building a case. I'm building ammunition." Thornwood looked up, and his eyes held centuries of calculated fury. "Ravenna thinks they can rewrite the rules through force. I'm going to remind them that the old laws exist for a reason. That breaking sanctuary, murdering rivals, consolidating power through violence, these things have consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Silas asked carefully. "The kind that end houses. Permanently." Thornwood closed the journal with finality. "Tomorrow we go to war. But we do it with law on our side, with allies, with proof that Ravenna is the real threat to vampire society." He stood, moving toward the door. "Get some rest. Both of you. Tomorrow we'll test everything we are." He vanished into the shadows, leaving them alone again. Mira looked at Silas. "Are we really going to survive this?" "I don't know." His honesty was almost comforting. But we'll face it together. That counts for something. Yeah. She stood, exhaustion finally catching up. It does. As she climbed the stairs to her borrowed room, she felt the weight of what was coming. War. Politics. Ancient vampires with centuries of grudges. But she also felt something else. Purpose. Belonging. The strange, impossible sense that she'd finally found somewhere worth fighting for, even if it killed her. Chapter 8. Into the Gathering. The car was older than Mira's grandmother would have been. A vintage Rolls-Royce that purred like a living thing. Thornwood drove with one hand on the wheel, his attention half on the road and half on some internal calculation she couldn't fathom. Silas sat beside her in the back, dressed in formal black that made him look like a Gothic prince. She'd borrowed clothes from somewhere in the manor, a deep burgundy dress that fit surprisingly well and made her feel like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Nervous? Silas murmured, terrified, she admitted. I'm about to walk into a room full of vampires who probably want me dead. Not all of them. Some will just be indifferent to your existence. His attempt at humor fell flat. Stick close to me. Don't make eye contact with anyone unless they speak to you first. And whatever you do, don't accept food or drink from anyone except Thornwood. Why? Blood contracts. Obligation magic. Vampires can bind humans through consumption. Even something as simple as wine can create a debt. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. The gathering has rules, but those rules have loopholes. Stay alert. The venue appeared through the trees like something from a fever dream. A Gothic cathedral repurposed into a meeting hall. All soaring arches and stained glass that depicted scenes of ancient battles. Cars lined the circular drive, vintage Bentleys, modern Teslas, even a horse-drawn carriage that looked lifted from another century. Impressive turnout, Thornwood murmured, parking with precision. More than I expected. Good or bad? Mira asked. Depends on who came to support us and who came to watch us fail. He turned in his seat, fixing them both with an intense stare. Listen carefully. We're walking into a viper's nest. Every word matters. Every gesture. Ravenna will be here. Katerina herself, if I'm reading this right. She'll want to confront me publicly. Make an example. What do we do? Silas asked. We stay calm. Professional. We present the facts that Ravenna violated sanctuary, broke ancient law, sent assassins to my home. We let the other houses see that I'm not weak, that I'm willing to fight back. Thornwood's expression hardened, and we make sure everyone understands that attacking my household means attacking me. He stepped out, and suddenly he was different. Taller somehow, more present. The casual weariness he wore in the manor had transformed into cold authority. This was Lord Lucian Thornwood in his element. 4 centuries of power wrapped in a tailored suit. Mira followed on unsteady legs, Silas a steadying presence at her side. The cathedral's interior stole her breath. Candles burned by the hundreds, their light refracting through stained glass to paint the assembled vampires in shades of blood and gold. The air smelled of old incense and something darker, the distinctive copper tang of blood wine. Vampires filled the space, clustered in small groups that screamed territorial. Each wore the subtle markers of their house, colors, jewelry, the way they held themselves. Mira counted at least 5 distinct factions, maybe more. And standing at the center, surrounded by a coterie of beautiful, deadly followers, was Katerina of House Ravenna. She was nothing like Mira had imagined. Not the monster from nightmares, but something worse. A woman who could have been 30 or 300, with platinum hair and a smile that promised salvation and damnation in equal measure. When her gaze swept across the room and landed on Thornwood, her smile widened. Lord Thornwood, she called, voice carrying effortlessly. How unexpected. We heard rumors you'd become a hermit. Rumors of my isolation have been greatly exaggerated. Thornwood moved forward with predatory grace, and the crowd parted. Though I appreciate your concern, Lady Katerina. It's so rare to find vampires who care about their neighbors' well-being. The sarcasm was sharp enough to cut. Katerina's eyes narrowed, then shifted to Silas. And you've brought a guest. How interesting. Her gaze dissected him, clinical and cold. That's a Corvus familiar. I thought they'd all been destroyed. You thought wrong. Thornwood's voice could have frozen fire. Silas is under my protection. Bound to my house. Any attack on him is an attack on me. Bound? How fascinating. Katerina circled them slowly, a shark scenting blood. And when did this binding occur? 2 nights ago. The same night 3 of my hunters disappeared near your territory. Her tone remained pleasant, but menace leaked through. What a remarkable coincidence. Not a coincidence. A consequence. Thornwood stood his ground. Your hunters violated sanctuary, entered my home without permission, attacked my guests. I defended my property, as is my right under the old laws. A murmur rippled through the assembled vampires. Sanctuary violations were serious, the kind of breach that destabilized the entire system. You're claiming, Katerina said slowly, that House Ravenna sent assassins to your home? That's quite an accusation. It's quite a truth. Thornwood gestured, and Silas stepped forward. Tell them what happened to Lord Draven. All eyes turned to the familiar. Silas's voice was steady, carrying across the cathedral. 4 nights ago, Lord Draven of House Corvus was murdered. Blood poison, silver nitrate, and wolfsbane administered by someone he trusted. House Ravenna orchestrated the assassination to seize Corvus territory. They then hunted his familiars to eliminate witnesses. Lies, Katerina said smoothly. Lord Draven died of natural causes. A feeding accident. These things happen with older vampires. Natural causes don't involve multiple familiar executions. Silas held her gaze. I survived, barely. And when I sought sanctuary with Lord Thornwood, your hunters followed. They attacked in his home, on protected ground, violating every law that keeps our society from collapsing into chaos. The murmurs grew louder. Vampires exchanged glances, calculations visible in their ancient eyes. A new voice cut through the noise, male, cultured, carrying the weight of authority. If what you say is true, Lord Thornwood, then House Ravenna has committed serious violations. But you'll need more than testimony from a bound familiar. They're notoriously loyal to their masters. This could be fabrication. Thornwood turned toward the speaker, a vampire with dark skin and silver-threaded hair, wearing the deep blue of House Blackwater. Lord Marcus, I'm glad you're here, because I have more than testimony. I have evidence. He produced the leather journal from inside his coat, holding it aloft. 2 decades of documented treaty violations, territorial encroachment, suspicious deaths, unauthorized turnings, all committed by House Ravenna, all ignored because no one wanted to challenge the second most powerful house. You dare. Katerina's composure cracked slightly. I dare because someone must. Thornwood's voice resonated with centuries of controlled fury. You've been operating above the law, Lady Katerina, building power through violence and intimidation. It ends now. Bold words from a hermit with one familiar and a human pet. Katerina's gaze slid to Mira, and something predatory flickered in her expression. Tell me, Lord Thornwood, does this human know what she's walked into? Does she understand that she's now a legitimate target? That by standing with you, she's declared herself my enemy? Ice flooded Mira's veins, but she forced herself to meet Katerina's eyes. I understand perfectly. Do you? Katerina drifted closer, and vampires moved aside, creating a path. You're mortal, breakable. In a year you'll be dead or broken or begging for mercy. What makes you think you belong in our world? Because she has more courage than half the vampires here, Thornwood said coldly. And because she's under my protection. Touch her, threaten her, even look at her wrong, and I'll make what I did to your hunters look merciful. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Katerina's smile was razor sharp. Is that a declaration of war, Lord Thornwood? It's a promise, and a warning to everyone here. He raised his voice, addressing the entire gathering. I'm done hiding. Done pretending the system isn't broken. House Ravenna needs to be held accountable. And if the council won't do it, I will. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. Then Lord Marcus stepped forward. I support a formal investigation into House Ravenna's activities. If even half these accusations are true, the consequences must be severe. Another vampire emerged from the crowd, female with auburn hair and the green of House Ashmont. House Ashmont seconds the motion. One by one, other voices joined. Not all of them. Not even most, but enough to matter. Katerina's expression went glacial. You're making a mistake, Thornwood. All of you, when this investigation finds nothing, and it will find nothing, I'll remember who stood against me. I'm counting on it. Thornwood smiled, and it was terrifying. Now, Shall we begin formal proceedings? Or would you like to send more assassins and prove my point? The gathering erupted into controlled chaos. Vampires arguing, forming coalitions, choosing sides in a war that had just gone public. And in the center of it all, Mira stood beside Silas and Thornwood, wondering what she'd helped unleash, and whether any of them would survive it. Chapter 9. The Price of Truth. The ride back to Thornwood Manor was silent for the first 10 miles. Mira stared out the window, adrenaline still singing through her veins. The gathering had dissolved into tense negotiations, committees forming to investigate Ravenna's activities, alliances shifting like sand. They'd left before formal votes were cast, but the damage was done. War had been declared. Just not with armies. You did well, Thornwood said finally, his eyes on the road. Both of you. I didn't do anything, Mira said. I just stood there. You stood there when Katerina tried to intimidate you. When she implied you were expendable. His gaze flicked to the rearview mirror, meeting her eyes. That took courage. The other vampires saw it. Saw that my household isn't afraid. I was terrified. Fear and courage aren't opposites. Courage is acting despite the fear. He paused. You reminded me of someone tonight. The way you held your ground. The woman you loved. The car swerved slightly. Thornwood corrected with inhuman reflexes, but something had shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to carefully controlled emotion. Silas has been talking, he said. I asked. He deflected. I'm asking you now. Mira leaned forward. Who was she? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, her name was Rosalind. She was human. A scholar, obsessed with history, languages, things the world had forgotten. She wandered into my territory 200 years ago, looking for ruins of an old monastery. His voice went distant. I meant to frighten her away. Instead, I found myself fascinated. She saw me, truly saw me, and wasn't afraid. Just curious, what happened to her? Time happened. The one thing I couldn't fight. Thornwood's hands tightened on the wheel. I offered her immortality. Begged her near the end. She refused. Said she'd lived fully, loved completely, and had no regrets. That becoming a vampire would erase the woman I'd fallen in love with. He exhaled slowly. She died in my arms, and I've been alone ever since. The confession hung in the air, raw and honest. I'm sorry, Mira said quietly. Don't be. She chose her path. I've tried to honor that choice by not inflicting myself on anyone else, by withdrawing from the world she loved so much. His smile was bitter, until tonight, until you and your dying familiar forced me to care again. Is that so terrible? Ask me when this is over, when we know if any of us survive Katerina's retaliation. They reached the manor as midnight approached. The wards recognized them, parting like curtains to allow them through. Inside, the fire still burned in the library, and Mira found herself gravitating toward it despite her exhaustion. Silas followed, pouring her tea from a pot that appeared to have been waiting. You need to rest. I need to think. She accepted the cup, warming her hands. What happens now? Realistically, the investigation will take weeks, maybe months. Silas settled beside her. During that time, Ravenna will be pressured to cooperate, to open their records, allow inspections. But Katerina is clever. She'll have already destroyed evidence, silenced witnesses, created alternative narratives. So we accomplished nothing. We accomplished visibility, accountability. Before tonight, Ravenna operated in shadows. Now they're being watched. He met her eyes. That's not nothing. It's also not safety. No. His honesty was almost comforting. Katerina will retaliate. Not openly, she can't risk it now. But privately, quietly, she'll come for us when we're vulnerable. Then we don't get vulnerable, Thornwood said, entering with a bottle of something dark. He poured himself a glass. Blood wine, Mira realized with detached horror, and settled into his chair. We fortify. We gather more allies. We make ourselves too dangerous to touch. How? Mira asked. By doing what Ravenna fears most. Exposing them completely. Finding the evidence they think they've destroyed. Locating witnesses they believe they've silenced. His eyes gleamed in the firelight. You asked earlier what happens now. Now we hunt. We're 3 people against an entire house, Silas pointed out. 3 people with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Thornwood leaned forward. Katerina made a mistake tonight. She threatened you publicly, Mira. Made you a symbol. That means other vampires who resent Ravenna will rally to your protection. You've become valuable. I don't want to be valuable. I want to survive. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Thornwood's expression softened almost imperceptibly. But I understand. You didn't ask for this. Didn't sign up to be the human face of vampire politics. No, I signed up to save a dying cat. Mira laughed, the sound slightly unhinged. How did this become my life? The same way it became mine, Silas said quietly. By choosing compassion in a world that punishes it. The truth of that settled over them like snow. I'm going to my study, Thornwood announced, standing. There are calls to make, plans to finalize. You should both rest. Tomorrow we start gathering evidence. He left. Footsteps fading into the manor's depths. Mira and Silas sat in the firelight, exhaustion and adrenaline warring in her system. Tell me something, she said. Something true. Not about vampire politics or house wars, just something real. Silas considered for a moment. I'm afraid, he said finally. Not of dying, I've faced that already. But of failing you, of this bond making me care so much that when you're in danger, I can't think strategically. Can't be what Thornwood needs me to be. The bond isn't making you care. You cared before that. Mira set down her tea. In the alley when you were dying. You tried to warn me away. That was you, not magic. Maybe. His silver eyes searched her face. But now it's stronger, undeniable. I can feel your heartbeat, Mira. Your fear. Your determination. It's like you're threaded through me. And I don't know where I end and you begin. Is that terrifying? Terrifying. Exhilarating. Completely overwhelming. He moved closer, carefully maintaining distance. I've been bound to vampires for 300 years. I've never felt this with any of them. This connection. Mira's breath caught. What does it mean? I don't know. The familiar bond is supposed to be about power and service. This feels like something else entirely. His hand moved toward her face, then stopped. May I? She nodded, not trusting her voice. His fingers brushed her cheek. Cool, gentle, trembling slightly. You make me remember what it was like to be human. To feel things without calculation. To care about someone because they're worth caring about, not because magic demands it. Silas, I know, it's impossible. You're mortal. I'm bound to another master. We're in the middle of a war. His thumb traced her jawline. But impossibility has never stopped me before. The moment stretched between them, fragile and electric. Then footsteps echoed in the hall, rapid, urgent. Thornwood appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. We have a problem, he said. Katerina just issued a formal challenge. A duel, me against her champion. Stakes. If I lose, I surrender my territory and release all those under my protection. Ice flooded Mira's veins. Can you win? I don't know. Her champion is ancient, ruthless. I haven't fought a formal duel in a century. His gaze swept between them. But I have 3 days to prepare. 3 days to remember why I survived 400 years. We'll help, Silas said immediately. You'll train me, Thornwood corrected. Both of you. You'll push me, challenge me, remind me what I'm fighting for. His eyes met Mira's. Because if I lose, Katerina takes everything, including you. The weight of that settled over the room. Outside, the wind howled through the forest, and somewhere in the darkness, Ravenna prepared for blood. Chapter 10. Blood, Choice, and Forever. The duel took place at dawn, in a clearing deep in neutral territory. Mira stood at the edge with Silas, watching vampires gather in a loose circle. The rules were ancient, brutal. Fight until one yields, dies, or is unable to continue. No interference, no mercy. Victor takes all. Thornwood stood in the center, stripped to the waist, his pale skin marked with scars that shouldn't exist on an immortal body. Each one told a story. Centuries of violence survived, battles won through sheer stubborn will. Across from him stood Katerina's champion, a vampire named Valdric, 7 feet of muscle and cold precision. He looked like death carved from marble. This is insane, Mira whispered. This is vampire justice, Silas replied, his hand finding hers. Thornwood knew it would come to this eventually. Katerina couldn't let his accusation stand without responding. He's going to die, maybe, or maybe he'll remember why vampires feared House Thornwood for centuries. Neutral arbiter, Lord Marcus of House Blackwater, stepped forward. The terms are clear. Lord Thornwood fights for his territory, his household, and his honor. House Ravenna fights for dominance and the silencing of accusations. Combat ends when one party yields or perishes. Are both parties agreed? Agreed, Thornwood said. Valdric merely nodded. Then begin. They moved like lightning. Valdric struck first, a blur of motion too fast for human eyes. But Thornwood was faster, dodging with inhuman grace, countering with a strike that sent the larger vampire staggering. Blood sprayed, black in the pre-dawn light. The fight was beautiful and terrible. They moved through forms that predated modern combat, techniques refined over centuries. Valdric had strength and reach. Thornwood had speed and strategy, turning his opponent's power against him. But Valdric was younger, stronger. And as the minutes stretched, Thornwood began to slow. He's losing, Mira breathed. Not yet. But Silas's voice was tight with worry. Valdric landed a devastating blow, claws raking across Thornwood's chest, opening wounds that wept black blood. Thornwood went down, hitting earth hard. The champion loomed over him. Yield! Lady Katerina is merciful to those who submit. Thornwood laughed, ragged, pained, defiant. Mercy is for those who deserve it. She doesn't. He swept Valdric's legs, sending the larger vampire crashing down, then was on him with inhuman speed. They grappled, a tangle of limbs and fury, rolling through dirt and blood. Then Valdric's hand closed around Thornwood's throat. Yield, he commanded again, squeezing. Thornwood's face went gray. His hands clawed at Valdric's grip, but the younger vampire was too strong, too determined. Mira felt something crack inside her chest. Not the bond, but something deeper. The realization that she was about to watch someone who mattered die, and she was powerless to stop it. No, she heard herself say. Then louder, no! She broke from Silas's grip and ran into the circle. Mira, don't... Silas shouted. But she was already moving. Every vampire present turned to stare. Interfering in a formal duel was forbidden, punishable by death. But Mira didn't care. She grabbed a fallen branch, the only weapon available, and swung it with everything she had at Valdric's head. It connected with a solid crack. The champion released Thornwood, turning on her with murder in his eyes. Human, you've just forfeited your life. Then take it. Mira stood her ground, branch raised like a sword. But you'll have to go through me to finish him. Valdric moved, and Thornwood caught his wrist mid-strike. She's under my protection, Thornwood rasped, blood streaming from his mouth. You touch her, you answer to me. You can barely stand. Then it'll be a fair fight. Thornwood pulled himself upright, using Valdric's arm for leverage. His other hand shot out, fingers finding the champion's throat. Because she just reminded me what I'm fighting for. Not territory, not honor, but the people who depend on me, who chose to stand with me when they had every reason to run. Power blazed through him. Old magic, ancient fury. The accumulated will of 4 centuries spent surviving the unsurvivable. His grip tightened, and Valdric's eyes went wide with sudden fear. Yield, Thornwood commanded. Never, then die. Thornwood's hand twisted, and something fundamental broke. Valdric collapsed, dissolving into black smoke and ash. Silence fell over the clearing. Thornwood stood swaying, covered in blood and wounds, one hand still extended where his enemy had been. Then his knees buckled. Mira caught him, or tried to. He was too heavy, too solid. They went down together, his weight pinning her. Foolish human, he murmured against her hair, interfering, breaking the rules. You could have died. So could you. Her voice cracked, and I couldn't just watch. Why not? Because, the words stuck in her throat. Because you matter. Because this matters. All of it. Silas was there suddenly, helping lift Thornwood. We need to get him back to the manor. Those wounds will heal. Thornwood pushed himself upright with visible effort. Give me a moment. Lord Marcus approached, expression unreadable. That was highly irregular, Lord Thornwood. The human interfered. The human saved my life. If you want to punish her for that, you'll have to go through me. Again. Thornwood met the other vampire's eyes. And I'm just getting warmed up. Marcus studied them for a long moment. Then impossibly he smiled. The duel is concluded. Lord Thornwood retains his territory, his household, and his honor. House Ravenna's challenge has failed. He turned to where Katerina stood at the circle's edge, her expression glacial. Your champion is dead, Lady Katerina. By the old laws, you owe House Thornwood restitution, territory, resources, and a formal apology before the council. This isn't over, Katerina said coldly. No, Thornwood agreed, blood still dripping from his wounds. But it's turning. You wanted to prove I was weak. Instead, you've shown every house here that I'm willing to fight, to die, to protect what's mine. Think carefully before you challenge me again. They left the clearing in tense silence. Thornwood leaning heavily on Silas, Mira walking beside them, feeling the weight of every vampire's gaze. Back at the manor, they collapsed in the library. Thornwood's wounds were already beginning to close, vampire healing knitting flesh and bone. That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen, Silas said to Mira. I couldn't let him die. You could have died. I know. She met his silver eyes. I didn't care. Thornwood laughed, weak but genuine. You're both insane, and I'm grateful for it. He looked between them, something shifting in his ancient eyes. I made you an offer once, Miss Thorne. Protection, shelter, a place in my household. But that was before tonight. Before you proved you'd risk everything for us. What are you saying? I'm saying you've earned a choice. He sat forward despite his wounds. You can leave. Take money, resources, my protection from a distance. Build a new life somewhere Ravenna can't reach you. Or, he paused, you can stay, permanently. Not as a guest or a temporary ally, but as part of House Thornwood. Part of us. As what? As whatever you want to be. Advisor, strategist, the conscience I've been missing. His voice softened. The woman who reminded me why immortality is worth surviving. Mira looked at Silas. And you? I'm bound to this house, to him. But Silas took her hand. I'm also bound to you. In ways that have nothing to do with magic. If you stay, I stay as myself. Not just as a familiar. If you go... His voice caught. I'll miss you every day for the next 3 centuries. The choice hung before her. Safety or belonging. Escape or purpose. The fragile mortal life she'd lost or this impossible new existence. She thought of her empty apartment. Her shattered reputation. The years of just surviving. Then she thought of Thornwood's rare smiles. Silas's silver eyes. The strange family they'd become in the space of a week. I'll stay, she said. Not because I'm afraid. Not because I have nowhere else to go. But because this... She gestured to encompass the manor, the 2 men watching her with hope and fear. This is worth fighting for. Thornwood's smile was luminous. Then welcome home, Mira Thorne, officially, permanently. One condition, she added. Name it. No more secrets. No more hiding. We face what's coming together. As equals. Agreed. He extended his hand. She took it, feeling something settle into place. A belonging she'd never expected to find. Outside, dawn broke over Thornwood Manor. And inside, 3 people who'd started as strangers became something more. A house. A family. A force that even Ravenna would learn to fear.